Hi, I'm Peter Cowan, the Bee Whisperer. It's that time of year when making sugar syrup seems to occupy your whole day. Making sugar syrup, putting it in containers, taking it out to the truck, going to the yards, filling up feeders, coming back, making more sugar syrup, and taking it out. But that's what you do. What's what you have to do when you have 160 hives. So it's time to get on with it. Got some water in my tank. Got to get the pump on. And the bag of sugar. Thank goodness for my sugar mixer. The other thing that you find is you continuously having to make trips to the dump as you fill the room up with empty sugar bags. Early October, and the bees are running out of time for filling their hive with food stores for the winter. Whether that be honey or sugar syrup, it's critical that they get that food in now. So don't waste a moment longer. If you're needing to feed your bees, feed them now before it's too late. Because once we're into the cold spells in October, you're not going to get more food in there. You'll then be relying on putting in candy, which is a very poor substitute for getting sugar syrup in the hive right now. You'll be wasting a lot of money spending it on winter patties and candy boards and that sort of thing, whereas all you really need to do is put that time in right now to get that sugar syrup in the hive, which is a far more healthy situation for the bees going into the winter. So I have been spending days getting through my deliveries of sugar. I've had a ton of sugar last week, a ton of sugar this week, and I'm down to about half a ton left. Mixing up my sugar syrup here and getting it into the containers and taking it out to the yards. So let's fill up a few more containers now. Each of these containers I put about 4 gallons or so in. They'll hold 5, but I put about 4 gallons in each one just to make it more manageable, and it's less likely to spill when I initially start to pour it out. As I say, we've probably only got another, depending on the weather, we've got until this weather cools down to feed the bees. Right now, the weather forecast for the coming week is nudging 70 degrees during the next 3 days, which is excellent for feeding, and then getting to low 60s for the next days after that with a bit of rain. So that means the open feeding won't work once we're cooler and it's raining. So you're relying on the feeders on the hive themselves. If we get more warm weather after that, great. I can try and get even more sugar syrup into those hives. It's far better the hive goes into the winter with too much feed rather than too little. A lot of folks this time of year ask me, can I overfeed my bees? And the answer is, now that we're in October, no, you cannot overfeed your bees. You can feed them and they'll stop taking it when they can't take anymore. Now, I wouldn't have given the same answer in the beginning of September. In the beginning of September, you can overfeed your bees. In fact, you can even get a swarm in the beginning of September, even in Maine. Generally speaking, the reason I wouldn't, it's not the swarming I'd be concerned about in early September, but the fact that I want them to be able to raise winter bees. I don't want that brood chamber plugged out with food in early September. By the time we're into late September, then yes, now I still want to start plugging everything out with food, so that the brood that's already in there, as soon as it emerges, I want them to backfill with sugar syrup or honey if we had a honey flow. Sadly, this fall we did not get a honey flow of significance, and so our bees are struggling to put food in the hive without this food. And I think a lot of folks might get caught short with their hives going into the winter light. So go out there and feel the weight of your hive. If it feels surprisingly light, you may not have enough food in there to survive the winter. In fact, you don't have enough there to survive the winter. And you've got to get food in. You've only got a few days left to do it. Maybe a few weeks if we're really, really lucky. Feeding at this time of year is absolutely critical. The hours and money you put into the hives right now is what determines whether your bees live or not. Well, that and mite treatments. Mite treatments are the #1 priority, but assuming you've been keeping pace with your mite treatments, then the feed is the one other critical factor that you can do something about to help those bees through the winter. So let's get these containers filled up into the truck and we'll get off to the next yard. Hi, I'm Peter Cowan, the Bee Whisperer. I'm just going around my yards now, feeding all my hives right now, particularly these ones with the single brood chambers. So they need to be really well topped up. A double deep is much more tolerant of having empty supers, empty space in it, but the single deeps and nukes, they need to be filled right up. So gloves are a bit stiff. I soaked them, I gave them a rinse, because when you're feeding with sugar syrup, your gloves get totally covered with sugar syrup, and I was tired of having sticky fingers after I'd been finished. So the problem with those gloves is they shrink and they go hard. So it's a pain in the neck putting the gloves on first thing after you wash them. But getting them on initially is a joke. Okay, so I'll go and get my sugar syrup. I'll bring it out to the hives, and we'll see how they're progressing. I'll heft the hives to see how close we are to having them full of sugar syrup now. I haven't purchased a hive scale. It'll probably be a good investment for me too, but like after the number of years I've been keeping the bees, I get a pretty good idea of how full any super is by lifting it up or holding it and estimating the weight that way, and that's usually enough for me to make my call. So let's see where we go. That's still got a way to go. Some of these, this is pretty heavy, this one. That one's not very heavy. That one still needs 3 or 4 buckets of honey. This one still needs a couple. That one's pretty heavy. That one's nice and heavy. That's good and heavy. That's not as heavy as I'd like it to be. This one's about the same. That one's heavy. This could do with more. I could do with more. Could do with a bit more. That's fairly heavy. That one's heavy, and that one's not heavy. So I'm still going to be filling all of these feeders, but another thing I can do, we're in a good position right now because we've got a great spell of good weather coming up, and also this yard is particularly well suited for open feeding because there's very few colonies in this part of Hampden. So I'm also going to really fill up my open feeder here as well, and with the nice warm weather we're going to get over the next 4 or 5 days, they'll be able to put in probably as much honey into the hives and as much sugar syrup into the hives by the open feeder as they will by the bucket feeder. So I'll probably make sure I come back here to top that up. They've emptied this. It's been a bit of a cool spell in the high 50s, low 60s, so that certainly influences how much sugar syrup they take. But this good weather spell we're getting, now this one, I know this hive has quite a bit of sugar in it and they're not taking quite as much out of the bucket, but I'll certainly top it up anyway. Still feels less than half full. Yeah, there's about 1/3 left in there. Now the problem is I've not been getting around to my yards as fast as I'd like, and that's allowed some of the bees to propolize some of these covers. But it's not too bad, there's still plenty of room for the bees to get the sugar syrup through here. So I'm filling these buckets right to the top, and as long as you fill them up to the top, when you turn them over like this, they dribble but stop dribbling very quickly. And they form a little vacuum here, and the bees will suck down the rest of that sugar syrup. 2-gallon buckets are a little more problematic with leakage, but so far I've had little trouble with either. So I very much like these bucket feeders, particularly for full feeding, when I'm feeding a lot. You can put quite a bit on the hive and leave them there. It's beautifully sunny here in this yard. It's the first sunny spot I've been to in Hampden. I drove from the other side of Hampden and it's all foggy. You see that fog is not very far away. This feeder's got some dead bees in it. It's absolutely normal. Put some of my wood floats back in here. And the straw, I'll get some more of that shortly. All right, now I'll fill this up with sugar syrup. Now once the weather gets a bit colder, these open feeders won't work because they'll just get too cold. But given the warm spell we have coming for the next 3-4 days, this feeder will work nicely and they'll take down quite a lot of the sugar syrup. And that's about as much as I can give them. That's about 14 gallons in here, which, as it happens, is just enough for the whole yard. I've got 14 hives in this yard, so each one is a gallon on the top, and each one is a gallon in the feeder. And now, just put some more floating stuff in there. Stuff to stop them drowning. And these fronds of goldenrod work pretty well. Give them something to crawl on and pull themselves out of the sugar syrup, because they will fall into the sugar syrup and they'll fight. And there will be a fair few that die. But I've not come across many types of feeder that don't kill bees or allow some to drown, with the exception of the bucket feeders. So, this yard is ready to go, ready to leave it. All have a gallon of food on the top, which will bring them close to being ready. I'd say the fullest of these hives will be ready with just that gallon. I'd say half of them, though, need more than a gallon, and a good deal of that will come from this. But I'll be back here before the end of the week and top up these top feeders again, and I'm pretty sure that that's going to have it ready then for the winter. So these weren't entirely full, but they were mostly full. So that's around the 25 to 30 gallon mark that I've just put in the hives there. So I'll get that finished and move on to the next yard. There we have it. We've got a brief spell where we're going to be able to get those feeds in. So I'd suggest you get round your yards and make sure your hives feel good and heavy. After the weather cools down from this, I don't expect we'll get many opportunities to feed them again. So remember, they need time after the sugar syrup's gone into the hive for them to be able to cure it and drive off the last of the water to bring it down to about 18%. Otherwise, there's a danger that the sugar syrup can ferment in the hive. And we don't want that. More phone calls. I'm Peter Cowan, the Bee Whisperer. See you next time.